I live in Martinsville, Virginia, a pretty small, depressing little town in middle America. I moved across town about 10 years ago into a new home with a huge field for a backyard, completely tucked away in the woods to its own, with very little sight of neighbors and noise. When we moved and started settling into the new home, we had to get rid of a rundown trailer home that sat behind us that belonged to the previous residents of the area. While destroying the old trailer home, we realized we could just use the best parts of it and utilize it for our podcast that we do. I wanted to have a studio, so we eventually sawed the trailer in half and hauled away the unusable areas of the trailer. It ended up with us using what appears to be a bedroom and a bathroom, and we just tore down the walls separating the rooms to make more space for our soon-to-be podcasting studio. While cleaning it out, we soon discovered items from the once bedroom of a teenager. Faded Nirvana posters on the wall. Rockstar magazines ripped apart. We didn't think much of it as we just threw it all away. We built the studio and all seemed well. This all occurred in 2008, and through the years we always heard noises while inside the place. However, for many years we ignored them, claiming it to be wind or other natural sound. We once heard from our uncle who went inside to fetch some things that he felt a spirit grab his ankle and yank him as he was exiting down the steps. Our uncle fell to the ground and ran up to our actual home spouting at the mouth that a ghost had grabbed his leg and forced him to fall to the ground. We ignored it, simply thinking our aging uncle was just blaming his uncoordinated ways on spiritual beings. We never took him seriously at all and just laughed it off. Years would go by and I personally never felt any spirit of any sort. Until last December. One night, like any other night, it was late around 3 a.m., and we just finished recording the Underground Crowns podcast when we heard noises trickling all throughout the building, comparable to throwing small objects from a distance and just aiming to hit the building. We heard this go on for nearly 5 minutes off and on. Continuing our conversation and ignoring the mysterious noises, the loudest thud completely scares us out of our seats. Now this thud was like a football player trying to ram the door down with raw power. A very, very frightening noise. I was scared shitless. I looked over at my co-host and he was white as a sheet. I didn't know what to think. It couldn't have been anyone because no one was around but us. The loud banging on the door was like a shotgun going off. Mind you, this loud thud is occurring in the same spot my uncle was tripped by the spirit years before. It was very alarming. We didn't even leave the place until 2 hours after the initial thud. We didn't know whether it was a killer, however unlikely anything seems logical when you meet a spirit for the first time. That was my first ghost encounter. After 2 hours, we are so curious we actually looked into who lived into the home that would become our podcasting studio. We found the street, found the address, found the documents with the name Tim Buller. Tim Buller was an 18-year-old kid who committed suicide in 2004 by hanging himself in the very bedroom that would become our studio just 4 years later. We were completely stunned to find out that Tim Buller was a kid who had very similar music taste that we had, and very close in age, thinking if we knew him, we probably would have been friends. Doing more research, we discovered Tim committed suicide to immense bullying of his peers. It brought him to the point of suicide. Very saddening, and we wondered to this day what we did or said that made Tim want us to know his presence was in our midst. Bit of an odd situation, but 100% true. When I was younger, 13 to 14, I attempted to take my life at the second floor of my old home. I was a very emotional teenager. Thinking back now, I can't really remember what was the last straw, but that day, I decided to take a knife from our kitchen and walked up the stairs. Our second floor was incomplete at the time. Wooden floors, but no beds, furniture, or electricity. I had used the second floor as sort of a quiet place to go to listen to music, practice my guitar, etc. Long story short, I began to cut through my wrist in typical emo kid fashion, but I ended up crying through it, sobering up, and just sort of walked back downstairs and kept living. Now the odd part. I never told anyone about it. I love my mother, and telling her at the time would have been devastating to her, especially since after that moment, I seemed to be getting better. However, a few months passed and my mother ran to my room downstairs one afternoon, pale as ever. She seemed frightened, and sort of blurted out that she saw a ghost. My mother has never believed in ghosts, so her pale look meant she was 100% certain. She said she was cleaning the room beneath the second floor, in the area next to the stairs, when she saw a young boy appear from the corner of her eye. The boy takes a few steps away from the stairs and disappears. She said she called my name to it, believing it was me, but freaked out and ran when it vanished in midair. Immediately, I thought back to my attempted suicide. I finally shared my story with her. It had been a few years now, and she was very understanding. She mentioned the spirit had my old look, longer hair and a very sort of depressed walk. It startled me. I made a few attempts to go back upstairs, but I never saw anything, and never found a reason to go back up there. Again, a few months pass, I graduate high school. I move out. I am now living on my own, but my mom mentions this apparition from time to time. She still sees it. In similar fashion, the apparition walks down the stairs, takes a few steps towards our living room, and vanishes. I'm posting this now because my mom shared a new point of view during the holidays. She came up to visit. I don't enjoy going down to her old home since it makes me feel uncomfortable, and I never seem to be able to sleep in my old room. Now, my mother finally completed the second floor this last year, and she's renting it out to a coworker who carpools with her. Apparently a few weeks back, the coworker mentioned a kid that seems to haunt upstairs. He said he always does the same thing. He's knelt down on the floor, gets up, walks across the entire room slowly, then walks downstairs. I haven't met her coworker yet, but Mom said she showed him an old photograph of me, and the guy laughed it off saying he was positive the spirit was me. Mom asked him if he'd like a different room to sleep in, but he doesn't seem concerned. He says the spirit has never tried to communicate or hurt him, so he just sees him from time to time, and it's become routine. Not sure what to make of it. I always thought the paranormal was spirits of dead people or demonic entities of some sort, but I am very much alive and apparently roam the second floor of my old home from time to time. It weirds me out. Mom has mentioned I must go back someday to confront the spirit, but I truly have no idea what I'd say, or what I'd do if I ever saw it. Hello, people. So, I'm new here and I hope this doesn't get removed by an automod or something, but here we go. First of all, this is 100% true. I swear on my mother's life, but you guys can judge by yourself. I'm just here to share. So, some 7 or 8 years ago, I was asleep at my grandma's house at which I grew up, and I hear a lot of crazy events which happen to my uncles and aunts there, but I'm not here to talk about their encounters, just mine, and nothing ever happened to me there before that night. So I wake up at night. Don't remember the time, but I'm pretty sure it was before 5 a.m., because I didn't hear the call to prayer at the time. My eyes open up and I see the freaking bathroom door open, and this white silhouette coming out and going into the kitchen. Now at that time I was thinking I was dreaming, but here's the fucked up part. Right after that thing ran into the kitchen, I hear its freaking footsteps like fucking 3 or 4 seconds after it moved. I was so freaking shocked I could not breathe. In my mind I was thinking this must be a dream. There is no way this just happened. But guess what? The thing returned running, and the door opened and it went in, and the door closed, and 3 seconds later the footsteps followed. I'm Muslim, by the way, and after that I spent the whole night reading 2 or 3 surahs I knew. Now, a long time after that I told myself I was dreaming, but my cousin came one day and told me that while he was sleeping, he felt something remove the cover where he was sleeping, and woke up and saw a woman and screamed so hard that the whole family woke up. But they told him it was just a dream, and he went back to sleep to wake up some hours later to the woman and started screaming again. And after it, he couldn't sleep there anymore. I swear to God I'm typing this at work, and actual tears are coming out of my eyes. And sorry for the long post, I just wanted to get this off my chest. P.S. Sorry about my English. I'm Moroccan. We speak French and Arabic. I've always liked taking bike rides down by the beach, but this particular day was just downright creepy. One day, my friend and I decided to ride down to the abandoned road which led to the beach. The town had the entrance blocked off with concrete barriers. We stopped at the barriers because it's right in front of the train tracks, and beyond the train tracks was the road. People always tend to stop there because it's a nice chill spot to talk and to watch the train ride by. Well, there were two guys chilling there having a beer, and we pull up next to them and said what's up, since it's always rude to pass without saying hello. These guys were talking about a homeless man that we both knew that always hung out at that spot and that we always enjoyed talking to. I forget the homeless man's name since it's been so long, so let's just call him Bob. Bob liked to chill and have a beer like he normally does with the radio on, listening to whatever station, I don't remember. But these guys were talking about how he had died a few days prior. This kinda made me feel down because the guy was a very cool dude. He'd occasionally take a puff of a joint we'd rolled and talk about his life. Well, we say our goodbyes to the guys and we cross the tracks. Across the train tracks was the abandoned road, which is all broken up but still had the paint markings on the ground like a normal street would have. The road led straight into the lake where it breaks off. You could still see parts of the road broken up in the water. It was a very foggy day, so it made the road look really spooky. As we got further down, we decided to stop for a moment and take a smoke break. I said to my friend, "Let's go through that path," and pointed at a path through the trees. We liked adventures through the woods, so I thought to myself, why not, especially on a spooky day like this. This path was only made through animals going through it, so it wasn't a very clean path. We had to brush against trees and sharp bushes. When we got deep into the woods, we stopped and our hearts sank. Over in the distance, in the middle of all the bushes and clearing, is Bob. Bob is just sitting there on a fallen tree with his bike standing up right beside him. He had a beer in his hand like always, and his radio on. All he was doing was staring off into space. As crazy as I am, I tell my friend, "Hey dude, let's go up to him." He at first didn't want to, but I didn't believe in ghosts, so my curiosity got the best of me. I finally convinced him to come with me, and we make it to Bob. When we got to him, I noticed his eyes were just pitch black. Not 1 ounce of white in them. This creeped me out, but I had to make sure. I was like, "Bob, what are you doing here?" Mind you, this was the most random spot, so to us it didn't make sense why he would just be sitting here in the middle of the woods. He said,
"Just having the last beer before I have to go."
I was like, "Have to go? Dude, we heard you were dead." He gave a creepy chuckle and continued to stare off into space. All I could say was, "So you're really not dead? You're not a ghost?" He gave another creepy chuckle and just kept staring off. At this point, my hairs were standing on the back of my neck and I was getting goosebumps all over. I look over to my friend and his face is all white, so I took this as a, "Let's get the hell out of here," and we rush out of the woods as fast as we could without looking back. When I got home, I looked up the most recent deaths in the town, and there he was. Bob. That was the creepiest ghost encounter of my entire life. I don't quite remember the cause of death, but still to this day, I've never gone back. My name's Matt, and I consider myself a skeptic. I am non-religious and I don't want to believe in ghosts or the paranormal, but I've had experiences that make doubting just a bit harder. I'm 32 and at the end of high school I went to work at a local video store. This storefront had been a video store twice before when I was growing up, but it closed down, and a local company called Potomac Video, DC, Maryland, Virginia residents will know the place, tried their hand at the same location. Anyway, I worked there. Ended up doing quite well and became a shift supervisor. I love movies, so it was perfect for me. I ended up having many shifts with a lady who had worked for the 2 previous video chains in the same spot. Her name was Mary, and we got along quite well. It wasn't long before I noticed odd banging noises in the store when it was completely empty. These sounds sounded as if large, heavy VHS tapes in their cases were falling off the shelves and hitting the ground in various places within the store. but I never find any of those tapes on the ground. Occasionally, I'd even hear what sounded like someone smacking something into the wall right behind my head at the register. It clearly wasn't anyone in the shop besides us because A, that would sound different, and B, it would happen when those shops were completely closed, and no one was there. I asked Mary if she was noticing odd sounds, and she matter-of-factly said, "Yeah, that's just Bob. He's haunted the shopping center for years." At first I just kinda rolled my eyes at the suggestion, but she insisted that there was something behind it. She told me that back in the 70s, a good portion of the same shopping center, which included the spot where our video store sat, was part of a large drugstore. And one day that drugstore caught on fire, and sadly one of the firefighters died trying to put out the blaze. She was even able to bring newspaper clippings in about the event, so someone had died where I was working. Couple that with the odd sounds and uneasy feelings I got while I was there alone, and you can imagine how I felt. Now Bob was never a nasty or malicious entity as far as I could tell. He was mischievous, sure, but it always felt good-natured. We'd even wish him a good night when we'd close the store, which would often be met with a smack sound from within the store somewhere. Now, as a key holder and shift supervisor in a store like this, there are times when you would need to close and open the store. It comes with the territory. So, one week I was doing this because my manager was out of town, and I gladly accepted. It was your standard shift. I closed the store at around 9 p.m. I did the cash drops, ran whatever reports I had to get done, all that sort of stuff, and got out around 9:30, I'd say. But it could have been closer to 10 p.m. I set the alarm, went home, slept for a few hours, and went back to open the store alone. When I got there, I noticed that something was not right. At the front of the store, we had shelves that were similar to those at the center, but they were used for VHS tapes that we had for sale. When I went to the store, the for sale rack was empty, and all of the tapes were scattered across the floor on either side of it. And if that weren't enough, the sign that was attached to the top of the rack was off and laying about 20 feet into the store. These signs weren't screwed in or anything, but they were made of the same sort of metal, and to remove any of them took quite a bit of effort. I am not a small guy by any means, and it would take me maybe 10 seconds to wiggle and pry one of those things from the top racks. I could not imagine what could have caused the sign to dislodge itself and fly so far into the store when it took so much effort just for a strapping young guy such as myself to take it off in the first place. I took a bit of time trying to shove the sign back onto the rack, and as I did I contemplated one of the other key holders could have done this as a prank. The only other people that could have done it were the manager who was out of town, Mary, who had the sense of humor but took the job seriously enough to rip into someone who would fuck with their fellow employees like that, and my district manager who clearly would not have done it. This is not proof of the paranormal, and I accept that, but to this day it makes me wonder what went on there that night. There are other similar but smaller experiences that I had working there for like 2 or 3 years, but that is the one that really sticks with me. Thanks, Bob, for making my experience there even more interesting. Ever since I was little, I had a hard time going upstairs in my grandparents' house. I was always scared to pass the Victrola, a gramophone where you open the door and place the record in and then hand crank it to work, that sat in the corner at the top of the stairs. The guest room where I'd stayed just so happened to be on the other side of the Victrola, of course. I would run past it knowing that I was being watched by whatever it was. This fear followed me throughout childhood into early adulthood. My cousin moved into the house last year and moved the Victrola into the office, and I hadn't had a problem walking up the stairs since. I was talking to her about why it scared me and described what I would see and feel when I was near it. I felt like something was either standing in or crouched on top of it, seeing as it seemed to be a form from mid-stomach up or compact or crouched on top of it, making it seem smaller than it was. It was always a dark shadow shape with just white circles for eyes. I couldn't describe it well enough to my cousin, so I drew it on the whiteboard we had next to us at the moment. She got creeped out and just put it away. We figured that's where the story ended, but she brought it up to my uncle and he was really interested in it. He asked to see what I drew, and when she showed him, he got excited and said that he saw the same thing as a child. The Victrola used to be in my great-grandparents' guest room, and he would wake up to it trying to play on its own and would see this figure by it. So far, it's just my uncle and I that have been able to see it. It is safe to say that the Victrola isn't going to be coming out of the shut office anytime soon. I'm currently at my job as I type this. I work for a large company's factory as their security. We do rounds 2 hours at a time and then swap out with the other guard on duty so they can do their 2-hour round. The last round I was on scared the living hell out of me. The factory part of the plant itself can fit a couple football fields in it, so that takes up a decent portion of my round. My favorite route to take is the perimeter of the plant first and then start from the back and work my way up to the executive, marketing, and human resource offices last. The whole round was going extremely smooth considering all the workers were home for their holiday vacation, so it took less than an hour to finish checking the plant. I got to the door of the hallway that human resources was attached to, unlocked it, and went in. The lights were all off save for one overhead light down at the other end of the hallway and a little bit of light coming in from the plant, but that was normal for human resources after hours. I unlocked the side door to get to my checkpoint that I needed to scan and went in. I froze to see a shadow of a man on the wall. If there was someone making that shadow, they would have to be in the hallway I just left. My heart started beating out of my chest and I felt panicked. The reason that my panic was so odd was because I live, eat, and breathe spooky, so stuff like that doesn't really faze me. This time was different. I felt a complete sense of dread. There was no one in that hallway a few seconds prior, so I flipped on the light to quickly finish my check of that portion of the office. I flipped the light back off and hurried up to the other portion of the human resources offices. The whole time I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was directly behind me. The muscles in the center of my back were extremely tense at this point, and I couldn't get to the scan point fast enough. I fumbled with my Tor wand, the device that we use to scan the checkpoints, and clumsily scanned the checkpoint. At that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes leering at me. So, unlike any rational individual that would nope the hell out of there and not look back, I turned around. The same masculine shadow was against the wall in that section of the office, but this time, it looked like it was posturing up. I went to hit the red button that unlocks the door to leave the human resources offices, but in my panic, I couldn't hit it immediately. After about my 5th attempt to hit the button, I finally made contact, opened the door, and slammed it shut as I left. I went through the rest of my round shaken, noticing office chairs in random parts of the hallways of marketing and by the executive offices that weren't there during my previous round. After I finished my round, I went back to the guard shack, which is where I'm at now. It happened about 2.5 hours ago and I'm still really shaken up. I love paranormal investigations, horror films, and creepy stories, all of which only mildly creep me out at best. But this incident left me with a feeling of pure terror, dread, and helplessness that I have only experienced once before, which is a story for another time.